I didn't even look at the chair slides. Oh, gosh, I just...
I've looked and I'm not surprised.
Exactly. Say what? Oh, hey. Ton of remote people. Okay, I think we're about ready to get started. I see we have a bunch of remote people, and they seem to be able to hear. Okay. As a reminder to those who are remote, you can get, we do have in the Meet Echo interface, there's a way to jump into the virtual queue, and you can speak your questions as opposed to typing them in Jabber. And with that, I know, so we can go ahead and, so first of all, welcome to the NTP Working Group. This is the IETF Notewell. You will have seen it before. There are a number of policies to which we ask you to adhere, and this is also our IPR regime. So everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you're not familiar with it, you did actually acknowledge it when you registered as well. So anyway, that's the Notewell. This is our agenda for the day. We have a second page. Yeah, we have a second page to the agenda. So the first thing we're going to do is agenda back. Well, first of all, we're going to do a minute taker. I know we have, Tal has agreed to take minutes. Do we have a Jabber scribe? I thought that might be the case. I saw you sign in. So Rich has agreed to be the Jabber scribe. And at this point, we're going to do agenda bashing. We had a bunch of NTP related topics first, and then after that we had sort of some TikTok stuff, even though this was the NTP working group, because to sort of remind everybody, our intention is to finish the enterprise profile and to close TikTok and create a single time working group so that we have all of the time resources in one place, because that's effectively what we've had for the last several years anyway. I have had a request to sort of swap the TikTok stuff with the NTP stuff, so that for somebody who will be arriving a bit later. So, so we will start with the TikTok stuff. As far as the TikTok working group status goes, we do have one document, the enterprise profile, and it is ready to go to the IESG. We currently, between the two working groups, have 4 documents queued up and ready to go, and I have discussed this with Suresh, and they will be coming out post with. So the next 2 items, you can do them in either order you would like, Doug, but it would be for you. Are there any other agenda bashes, by the way? No. Okay, great.
So I thought I'd start with just an update on, you want me to do it?
No, you can come up here and do it.
So I'm Doug Arnold. I'm Vice Chair of IEEE 1588. I thought I would just give you a quick update where that's at. We have a draft revision. It's gone through sponsor ballot and recirculation. And we have some comment on the recirculation, which may or may not force us to do another recirculation. We're meeting this week to decide that. If not, we will go right to publishing. Then we would probably get out by the end of the calendar year. If we have to do another recirculation, maybe it'll get out by the calendar year. We would do whatever the minimum one is. So that's where we're at. After that, we expect to be updating it with things that we had pushed off, working more in the mode of IEEE 802.1, if you're familiar with that group at all, where we will be doing amendments and core agenda on a much shorter time scale, and then do a roll-up revision every once in a while. So we'll be making changes right away on that. Any questions? Yep.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to present us some slides created by Steve Gundert at IBM and myself, mostly Steve. We're looking to create a secure profile for 1588. I'm not sure where we're going to do it yet, but we're just presenting it here to get some feedback if possible. It will be a profile targeted at sort of enterprise, single organization networks, mostly in the financial industry. But they're adamant that they want something that has built-in security.
Oh, here.
Okay. So this is being driven to a large extent by regulations. In the U.S., we have FINRA, and there's required that clocks be maintained to 50 milliseconds, which really isn't that difficult. But you have to also log it and provide a record showing that you have stayed in compliance, and have audits showing that you have some reasonable scheme for keeping good time and that sort of thing. A similar requirement came out of Europe, which has a tighter time synchronization requirement, 100 microseconds. And a lot of firms, even if they're in the US, do trades in Europe as well, or if they're in Asia, they do trades in Europe. And so they're going to want to obey that as well. Then there's also the players in finance who are doing faster things, and they have their own much tighter timing requirements just for their own measurement system, things like high frequency trading going on as well. So the data center in this case would be the data center for a bank or other financial type firm. And so they have multiple sites. That's one of the things we have to account for, even though it's enterprise network. It can be quite a big distributed, even globally distributed network. And so there's some, we have to take that into account with whatever we come up with. So in timing, it seems like security is always an afterthought. We had NTP, just NTP, and then we had AutoKey to try to add security, and now we're improving that. Then we had PTP, and all we had was some experimental annex in version 2 that no one ever implemented, so we don't really have security for that. So it's kind of an afterthought in the timing standards community, but not for these customers. They're adamant. It's like, what are you guys doing? I get calls from them saying this is not acceptable. So they really say it has to be secure. So it's a strict requirement. Now there is some work was done, and it's going to come out in this revision that I mentioned before in 1588. There's a discussion of approaches to security that's in an informative annex, and then there's also a TLV that can be attached to any PTP message that was defined, which we tried to make versatile enough to use various key exchange mechanisms that are anticipated might be used. So these things are coming out, but they're not out yet. And what is published is this NXK that nobody uses, so it's pretty much useless at this point. Okay, so as I said, it's a required practice in this industry, and in really in all industries in an increasing extent. And so that's really the impetus for this effort that we're starting, is to address this. Many presentations and papers have been given on the problems associated with insecure time. Now, there's some other things that have come about talking to people in this industry that they would like to see. One is we have to take into account that many of the PTP slaves will actually be just software running on standard hardware. What it has available in terms of hardware support will probably vary, and so it has to be able to work in the worst case where it's just some server with no hardware time stamping capability, and do the best you can. Another interesting thing they brought up when I talked to some of these folks is we're already implementing several key exchange mechanisms. Can you please not make us do another one that's just for timing and not used anywhere else? So they would really like something standard that they already have implemented. That would make them happy. And I'm sure there will be some more things that come out as we get into this. They'll say, oh, we really want this and not that. So we're going forward with an effort to draft something. I don't really have a profile to present to you yet. Not sure even where it's going to be. It might be here. But some of the things that were suggested that we might think about, because they might be helpful with security, would be if you had a network that could use peer delay. That's easier to secure because a lot of the timing information is just exchange on links from one device to another. In a network that can support peer delay, which means every switch basically participates. We might look at Tesla, which is, has been described in this group with respect to NTP. Has been discussed with respect to NTP, so you're familiar with it, I hope. In PTP, we have the possibility to have a profile that requires two-step timing, and that could make security much easier to implement. So that's something to consider. We could say transparent clocks are a real complication that we don't want to take on at this point, because the people who design them kind of expect to be sort of altering messages as they go through, and sometimes even in a cut-through mode, and that can be really tricky if you're trying to do hash codes and that sort of thing. So maybe we won't take that on in the first place. Okay, so I'm just sort of announcing we're getting started with this. If anyone's interested, please contact. It's really not quite registering. There we go. Please contact me or Steve Gundart from IBM. We're sort of driving this, and we're looking for input on what requirements are, or if you're interested in getting started, we can go ahead and try to craft something, or at least get some ideas together on what PTP options we'd allow and not allow, and that sort of thing. Any questions?
Hi, Tal Mizrahi. First of all, very interesting. Definitely something that will be interesting in this working group. Just a general question, are you mainly targeting the financial market in terms of the accuracy and in terms of the applications that use time? Or are you also considering other applications?
We would consider other applications if they're similar enough, but the people who are coming to us and saying we want this are from finance. So those are we're going to tailor it for their needs. If it works for someone else, that's great. Or if someone comes along and say, we also need it, and we're similar enough that the same profile could work, then we would include them. But so far, we haven't heard from those folks. We're hearing from finance that they want this.
Okay, thanks.
Stu Card, anything to say about the White Rabbit variant?
So White Rabbit is very much of interest to the high frequency traders. A lot of them are playing with it already. But for most of the customers who are coming to us for this, it's more for the regulatory compliance, where they're talking 100 microseconds or something, and White Rabbit is just a complication they don't need to take on at this time. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a second. Go ahead, Watson.
Hello, this is Watson Ladd from Cloudflare. You mentioned key exchange where you only want to implement one. Why not NTSKE to agree on keys?
That's an excellent question. And we we definitely would consider that. We haven't got to the point where we're saying this is the one. And I think it's a very safe bet that the people who will be putting this into their network will also be running NTP, and they'll be wanting to run secure NTP. So I think it would probably be very helpful to them that if those two lined up in terms of key exchange mechanisms.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Let's do it again. I'll go to the opposite end of the world. Anything to say about PTP over extremely high variance links, wireless links?
Not really. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback from network operators about wireless and PTP. I know people do it in sort of dedicated wireless links where both ends are sort of proprietary by the same company. There is some work on the IEEE 802.1 to support Wi-Fi and using their built-in timing mechanism, which is likely to have better hardware support than just PTP messages. So they've developed an interface for that with the expectation that it'll be used, but I don't know how it fits in with this work. I think the people are looking to secure servers, which probably won't be on wireless, at least not in the near future, although eventually they might. And wireless devices, maybe handheld devices or laptops or something might just need NTP. And so they would get NTP over Wi-Fi, would be my guess.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah. So I continue to maintain that trying to cryptographically secure a protocol that only has one-way message transmission, so this would apply to both PTP and to broadcast mode NTP, is basically a doomed enterprise because they're never going to solve the problem of delay attacks. Whereas you have a query response, then you include a unique identifier in the query, and that establishes a time bound on the freshness of the response. But if you're trying to establish precision within 100 microseconds, while that's more precision than you can expect to get with NTP over the internet, that's easily achievable with NTP where your time source is in the same data center. And if given that that's the only environment where PTP is practical to begin with, why not just use NTP for this purpose?
So that's a good question. Why not just use NTP? Because if you pay close attention, you can get 100 microseconds with NTP with standard equipment and implementations. Maybe I think some people who are asking for PTP are anticipating the future. They say, okay, it's 100 microseconds now, but the HFT people are already turning around information and posting trades in 10 microseconds. And so if the regulators are really going to be looking for proper behavior, they're going to have to bring those times down. They originally asked for a nanosecond.
I think if you're trying to get to those levels, then you simply need to be able to have a trusted path between the source and the client. I think if you're on any kind of adversarial network at all and you're trying to get those precisions, you're just doomed.
Yeah, I mean, there are people, even high-frequency traders, who use hardware timestamp NTP, and they get quite excellent time transfer accuracies. Nevertheless, there's a number of network operators who have come to us, come to IBM, saying we would like a secure PTP, so we're going to give them that as well.
I mean, if you, I mean, if you have a customer demanding it, just make them feel better with no particular demands on what they're actually trying to accomplish, then okay. I understand that. I see that all the time. I don't think that's that's something for the IETF to consider. I think if you're actually trying to solve problems, then the answer is build a network where you can trust your wires, and don't do the crypto because it's not buying you anything.
Well, I think if I look at why PTP is popular in a lot of industries, it's probably because the availability of things like boundary clocks and transparent clocks, and probably a greater availability of, say, end devices with hardware timestamping. So that might be what's driving the desire to have a PTP version that's secure as well as NTP.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to resolve this today. Christoph?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
I can.
Nice. Sorry, I don't have video available. Just, yeah, to really reinforce Daniel's point, yeah, there's lots of theoretical work, and we've also seen it that says basically one-way or purely one-way communication has this drawback that Daniel pointed out. You're always going to be vulnerable to delay attacks, no matter what crypto you throw on the thing. And maybe it would be healthy to not just think about as like the alternatives being do PTP with mostly or just one way, or just use NTP, because PTP does support two-way communication. It's in its standard mode, that's just not the main source of data that you use for the actual disciplining of clocks. But you have a wired network, and it's definitely possible to talk both ways, and then you can get the guarantees. And also, I know that at least Martin Langer and myself are working on prospects of basically combining two-way and one-way approaches to have like two-way protocols with security cover this 100% guarantee of what offset you have at worst, and then being able to run like other protocols in parallel, where you don't just go from one to the next, but you actually look at the measurement results of both, and then you have this probabilistic, basically, feel for what your offset is probably, and then for in what interval your offset is guaranteed to be. And maybe that's going to be helpful in this regard. But also, could just something be done with a PTP profile where mainly the two-way messages are used for actual synchronization?
Well, PTP is usually used in a two-way mode, like NTP. But, you raise one interesting point, which is if you have a network where there's some kind of two-way protocol that's been carefully calibrated over some critical link, then that might be something that could just be used, and other protocols can initiate at the ends of that link, taking advantage of that well-characterized delays.
Okay. I think just to sort of wrap this up, I think the point is this, the revision to 1588 that actually includes a security mechanism will be coming out towards the end of this year. And that's just sort of the beginning of this security work. We will be, there's an enterprise profile that's ready to go to the IESG, and this would potentially be something like that for security. But there's a lot of, this work is just starting, so there's a lot of opportunities. And I think that there's a lot of synergy between the 1588 community and the NTP community, and we're solving some of the same problems. And so the more that we can leverage each other, the better off we will be. So thank you. And if anybody has any further questions or wants to participate, please talk to Doug. I'm kicking you out of the queue, Christoph.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. So with that, we're going to go back to the top of the agenda. And the first thing is I'm just going to do a really quick walk. We have just a quick couple of highlights of work that has been done. I think at the last meeting we actually announced that the MAC RFC had been published, so congratulations to Anshal. And this time we can announce with great fanfare that the BCP has been published, like last week. So to Daniel and to Dieter and to Harlan, thank you very much. We're very pleased to finally have that off our plate. We have 3 documents that are actually ready at this point to go to the IESG, NTS, the guidelines for defining packet timestamps and interleave modes. And now that we've cleaned out some of our chaff, we can move forward with those. And did I mention interleave modes? I did, yes. NTS, the guidelines for defining timestamps, and the NTP interleave modes are all ready to go to the IESG. With that, we didn't do a face-to-face hackathon, but we did actually have a virtual hackathon this weekend with some folks remote. Were they going to speak to it, or was Krister going to talk? Or
Yeah.
Okay. Is Krister online? Oh, he is online. There he is. So Krister, are you ready? I don't know if he's actually. Krister, are you ready to talk about the NTP hackathon? Can you get in the queue? Okay, well, we will come back to him. I'm not sure what the issue is, but they did, Watson and Chister and Martin all worked over the weekend. Actually, Martin and so if any of you all want to get in the queue and give a quick update on what you did, that'd be great. Otherwise, we will talk about it on the mailing list. Yang.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Dhruv. I'll give you a short update on the Yang model. So next slide. Use this, I guess. Yes. Oh, moved up a little. So we made an update between the two IETFs, mostly editorial. We were given comments regarding the Yang style guides that we should use more references, describe the reference in detail. So we made that change. We got a comment regarding the security consideration and explicitly highlighting that how the security of keys are taken care via the Yang model. So we have updated that. We are also using the NACM technique, which is the netconf access control list. So via which we set the NACM default deny, so that the part which we don't want people to have access to, such as keys modifications, that is hidden by default. So those are the main changes that we have done, and done a little bit formatting based on what is the RFC style guide with respect to tabs and all the other things that you need to take care before your documents can be sent to ISG. So we got some comments from Watson, so thanks for that. One of the things we wanted to explicitly discuss in this face-to-face is currently the NTS is not part of this Yang model. Now, among the authors, we thought that it's better to get what we have right now out of the working group, and anything else and new work anyway will continue, and we will use the augment mechanism of the base model to add new features, and it's perfectly fine for them to be in a future document, but we can get what we have right now, which is in a pretty stable space, and publish it. So that's the feeling of the authors, but we want to know what the working group agrees with this or not, or whether NTS, we should wait and add NTS into this model itself. So that was one of the key things which I wanted a feedback from the group. And if the group doesn't care, the authors have a feeling that we want to publish what we have right now.
AB cares.
Yeah, Suresh Krishnan. So personally, I think it should be there. And I don't think it's like a serial process, right? So you don't have to wait for NTS to be done to start incorporating things in there. So just do the stuff in parallel, right? And I can hold the document somewhere up the line for the references, right? So I don't think it should be an issue. Like we can still go through the whole process, like add the things, and then whenever the working group is done, kick it out. And then if something changes, we can take care of it after, right? So that's how I think about it.
The only thing is maybe from the author's point of view, I think the authors are a little bit, we have done the work, let us go. Otherwise, you'll keep adding us, keep making us wait for new features. So that's the feeling. But like, we want to do what's right at the same time.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that it really is sort of a separate piece, right? I mean, the implementations have sort of separated the NTS server from the NTP server. So they're sort of two, implementation-wise, they're two separate pieces.
That's also a good
Right,
point.
like so the counterpoint is like in software, right? We did a Yang model for multiple mechanisms, which probably don't ever coexist, right? So I'm just saying, like, if there's enough commonality between them, like we should do the right, like as I said, like do the right thing, right? But if there's nothing in common, like go ahead, right? But I'm sure there's like a bunch of stuff in common that we're either going to like redo or like, probably miss it, right? Like something like that, right? I'm not sure like how we want to do this. Like if you want to skip it to later, like how would you do it? Would you use schema mount? Is that what you're thinking of?
Basically, whatever is the common grouping, whatever things that we can use, we will use. And if it needs to be implemented separately, it's better belongs in a separate draft. So I want to know more opinion, more feedback. What's the right thing from the group as well? We have maybe more.
Harlan, if you have a point on this, go for it. I'll just stick around.
Go ahead, Harlan.
Oh, good. Okay. I trust you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. So the two questions I have are, has a reference implementation of the Yang model been done yet? And is it possible to use any of the existing NTP authentication schemes with Yang, as in the existing private key model?
I think the private key part is there. Auto key doesn't exist, and NTS is also not there. So only the basic, the key configuration thing is there in the model. And with respect to implementations, we had done a very simple, nothing that we can ship right now, but just to make things working, some test internally. But we cannot say that we have a vendor implementation either for this model yet.
Thank you.
Okay. So my view is like, if the authors like are like, want a break or something, just go for it. Like just get it done, send it off. And I just don't want to do a BIS of this, right? Like, so if you're
No, it's definitely never going to be the best.
Right. Like, so if you're going to do a schema mount, like for the stuff, I think I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah. It's always going to be augmentation or a schema mount or something. Never, it's not going to be a BIS.
Harlan, you're still in the queue. Did you get back in, or did I forget to push the button?
You forgot to push the button.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, it's not there yet. What? Go back to the. Let's do whatever's after the Yang, and I'll get this uploaded. All right. Port randomization. Fernando, you registered at, oh, okay. So you're in the queue. Did you register as a remote presenter or as a, oh, let me get to that.
Apparently, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll be presenting the draft on port randomization in NTP version 4. Next slide, please. So as an introduction to this document, I will switch off video because maybe it's better for the network. As an introduction to this document, it's essentially a document that updates the base NTP specification so that NTP clients employ port randomization.
Fernando, we're having
Yes.
a bit of an issue.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better now. Go ahead.
Okay. So essentially, this document updates the base NTP spec so that it employs port randomization for NTP clients. This document essentially puts the NTP spec in line with BCP 156, which is a BCP produced by the transport area on transport protocol port randomization. The base NTP specification essentially suggests that NTP clients employ the NTP service port 123 for the local port. And this has a number of implications. For example, it makes blind attacks against NTP easier. It hinders distributed denial of service mitigation because it's not easily to tell NTP server versus NTP client packets. And of course, this is a requirement that cannot be complied with when you have multiple NTP clients behind a NAT, because obviously you cannot reuse the same port number for the multiple clients. Most NTP implementations already do this because essentially they rely on the underlying operating system for picking the client-side port. And since nowadays most operating systems employ transport protocol port randomization, then this means that all of these NTP implementations benefit from that. Next slide. So this is essentially what this document does. It recommends port randomization on a pair association basis. I spell out this thing clearly because at some point we were discussing whether to do randomization on a pair association or a per request basis. But this is the most, let's say, conservative take. It's not that we have closed the door to randomizing on a per request basis, but this is the the most conservative take. And the document formally updates the NTP spec, obviously, so that this is the default choice for NTP clients. Next slide. So from an author's point of view, we wonder if the NTP working group wants to take this document as a working group item. So it's our question to the chairs and the working group.
Okay, there's been a, Fernando, can I ask you to do one more thing? I know there's been a fair amount of traffic on the mailing list about this. Can you just summarize what you believe the traffic on the mailing list has been?
Yeah, there have been essentially two things. So some of the comments essentially were that if you do port randomization on a per transaction basis, then that might have issues on the calculation of the on-time synchronization because packets might go through different paths. That's why this version of the document essentially has taken the most conservative approach, which is randomizing on a per association basis. So that's one of the things. The other comments that we have received, I think they were from Danny, was that, well, this doesn't completely eliminate like blind attacks or that there are other mitigations for this. And our response to that is that port randomization is a mitigation against blind attacks are at the transport layer. So you can do anything else on any other layers. In fact, you should. These countermeasures are essentially orthogonal. That means there are things that you can do at the application layer, like NTP does, or there are documents proposing that. but this is orthogonal to that. Whenever you want to perform blind attacks against a protocol, well, there are a certain number of values that you need to guess or know. At least IP addresses are transport protocol port numbers, and obviously randomizing the port number on the client side, of course, increases the difficulty to perform such attacks.
Okay. Obviously, we'll need to take this to the mailing list eventually. Are there any comments today about adoption of this draft? Okay, we will, let me do it another way. Is there anybody opposed to the adoption of this draft? Anybody in favor? Anybody will read it if we actually adopt it? What? Too many questions. I'm being corrected by our AD.
I'm going to assume Harlan wanted it to Mike. He's fine discussing this in the group.
Okay. Go ahead, Watson.
I'll read it and provide comments. I support adoption. I think we really do need this mechanism for DDoS prevention, among other things.
Okay, excellent. So we will take the call for adoption to the list. So I'm going to go backwards in time briefly to the hackathon. Since Chister can't get to the mic, I'm just going to point this out. I've uploaded it as I've uploaded it to the materials page, so it's not really a slide, and I clearly don't expect you all to read this at this point. But basically, the group of them worked for 2 days over the weekend, and I can't see that myself, so I have to look at my version here. And this is basically the test results of how far they got and what they tested. And first of all, I would like to thank everybody who worked remotely. I know especially the guys in Europe, you guys were working fairly late on this. And so if everybody would take a quick look at that and see where we are, and if this seemed to be fairly useful, I think it would be useful to have a conversation on the mailing list about whether to do another one of these again. I know the next IETF meeting is actually in Singapore, which time zone wise is pretty challenging. But maybe we can pick another time or another date if this is useful to do. The other thing that we talked about, I mean, we had previously discussed setting up a mailing list. I set one up, but we never actually used it. Specifically for implementation discussions, I think at this point, implementation discussions are, the NTP mailing list is generally not so overcrowded that we can't have those discussions on the NTP mailing list as well. But we also used a Slack channel. I don't know if a Slack channel is useful going forward for folks to, discuss implementation, testing questions, whatever. So we'll ask that question on the mailing list as well. But thank you to our completely virtual hackathon team. Any other questions or comments on the hackathon stuff? I will say it's really made a difference on helping us get critical mass and move NTS forward. So I think it is very key. All right. Next was on implementing time. So next is Anshul.
I don't have any slides on it because there is no major change from the discussion that we had in Thailand. There was no comments to be addressed. There was just a minor negligible change in the POSIX section. That's mostly the editorial change that there was. I don't think there was anyone who was against the adoption of the document. So I guess that's the question.
Did anybody have any questions or comments on the adoption of the document? Were there? Okay. So we're basically getting like 4 or 5 documents out the door and then 4 or 5 documents in the door.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, we do, it shows some sort of progress. All right, so there's no questions or comments. So thank you to Anshel and Wilhelm for the update of this document, and we will look at adopting it. Next was rough time. Is that?
Yes. So I don't have slides for either that too. But after the last discussion at the IETF in Prague, we have updated the rough time draft twice and with 2 major changes. One is in the timestamp section. We have added the modified Julian date format for the timestamps. And the second change was about the delay attacks, that how does rough time handle delay attacks. And I've updated that based on the text contributed by Tal. Thank you, Tal, for the contribution. There were other structural and language changes that was contributed by Marcus, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, sorry. Based on his implementation experience, he wanted some clarification for the text and language. So I made that in the last update of the draft. And there were, as far as I believe, no outstanding issues. If anyone has some comments or suggestions, they can say now.
Questions or comments on the rough time draft? Has anybody in here read this draft? Oh, excellent. How many read the implementing time draft? No, a little bit better. Excellent. No remote questions on implementing time, on rough time? Okay. Oh, wait, Watson?
Hello, so as one of the co-authors of the rough time draft, we are currently working on, or I am currently working on reconciling the PLL with the rough time estimates. If people have an actual use case where this is necessary, please let me know, because otherwise it is quite a bit of work. And for the applications like checking validity of certificates, you don't need this. So please let me know if people have ideas of implementation and application areas, that would be useful in guiding the future evolution. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I guess we have nothing. No questions for Anshel, so thank you. We will work on adopting that.
All right, thanks.
The next one is a draft. Well, Netta can talk to it. I think we've only seen Netta remotely before, so this is...
No, I was here a year ago.
Oh, that's right. You
yeah.
were here a year ago. I forgot about that. And we've seen you remotely since then.
Yeah, ever since. So hi, I'm Neda, and I want today to present very briefly Horus mechanism for NTP and the updates that were made based on the comments that we got for a working group adoption. Next slide. It's a joint work with Danny Dolev, Tal Mizrahi, and Michal Shapir. So a short reminder is we consider this threat model, but we assume that the attacker have full control of a large function of the NTP server, say quarter. We assume that he is capable of both deciding the content of the NTP and the timing when the response is going to run to the class. And of course, we assume that he is malicious and try to shift the client's time as much as possible. And next slide, please. And a short reminder of the solution of Horus architecture. So on the one hand, we rely on many NTP servers. We generate large pool of NTP, 100 of servers per client. But on the other side, we choose at random only 10 of them in order to avoid overloading the NTP servers. And finally, we use smart filtering in order to remove outliers and make it hard to the attacker to contaminate the chosen sample. Sorry. Next slide, please. So far we got comments on two topics. The first one was that we should decide how we want to use HONUS to enhance NTP security, whether it will be externally to the NTP or within within the NTP. So in draft 01, we added a hybrid approach when we say that when precision and accuracy are critical, then basically by default use NTP v4 updates, and when a threat or evidence of attack is detected based on HONUS samples, then you can use HONUS time instead. And the other topic was that since HONUS use greater variety of sample size server over time, so maybe it can cause adverse effect on precision and accuracy. So in draft 02, we evaluate these effects both on precision and in accuracy in different locations, both in Europe and in the US. And we found that HONUS has fair precision, around 3 milliseconds, and HONUS updates are close to the average NTP updates, up to 2 to 3 millisecond gap. Next slide, please. So far we have updates and draft based on all the comments that we got, and of course we continue evaluate HONUS performance and security for different attacks at different locations in the world, and we believe that HONUS draft is ready for working group adoption. Thank you.
From Harlan, is this appropriate for authenticated or unauthenticated time?
Good question. So we assume that for now it's unauthenticated because we don't have authentication yet, but we assume that the concept of HONUS and query many servers can be still exist, and we can still benefit it even when we are talking about authentication servers.
Okay, any other questions?
From Harlan, how is this threat model effective against authenticated servers, packets?
Yeah, so we consider man in the middle. We talked about man in the middle, but basically we assume that it's a much more sophisticated attacker that have control over the servers, which means that we won't recognize it. This attack by authentication. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Seems to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's a wow.
I won there.
Yes. Wow, I can't parse that.
So his response is that's a pretty big assumption.
What?
That you're assuming that the attacker has control of the server. That's the point.
We want to be able to cope with the most sophisticated attacker there is. So I think it's essential, and of course it can also tackle delay attacks and other things that authentication servers won't be able to detect.
Anything else from? Oh, there's one more from Harlan, Rich.
Oh.
Yeah, but I think it was a clarifying.
Oh, okay.
Maybe so. Harlan, it's a pretty big assumption over lots of servers.
Oh, I see.
But I think it was, yes, but that's the scope you're looking at, I think.
Yeah, because we're trying to be to create a safer environment that we can, So of course you can say, yeah, what the probability that the attacker would have this kind of control over a large function of the NTP pool, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to consider it when we want to create a new mechanism that cooperates with us. So.
Okay, Suresh, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Suresh Krishnan. So like one thing that like I like about this is like one of the things that has changed in the internet is the threat model itself, right? So if you start from 3552, we always assume the communication channel might be compromised, but the endpoints are usually not, right? And I think the IAB has started some kind of work on this thing to actually redefine this. So I think it's like a timely thing. Like, you know, we don't know how that's going to go, like how the IAB threat model update is going to go. But I think it's in the same kind of category. So I think I'm supportive of the work personally. So I think it's good.
Thank you.
Via Jabber, Danny Meyer says this might be useful if ganged with an NTP server.
Again, can you?
Tied together with an NTP. It might be useful if tied together with an NTP server. Danny says.
It might be useful.
Ah, it might.
I'm not sure I understand this comment. I'm just relaying the exact words. So maybe Danny, you can explain a little more.
Yeah, he hasn't typed any more in here, and he's not.
Okay, so what I can say is that in order to make it more deployable, we try to come up with a mechanism that relates to the client, and maybe modified it for with really tiny modifications. Of course, we can maybe benefit from using or modify the NTP servers, but then I think that the deployable will be much harder. So we are looking at it. This is one of our further research topics, actually. So,
okay. Any other questions? So I think we will take the adoption discussion to the mailing list. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing I wanted to note, if those of you who haven't looked at the ANRP schedule, not the IRTF open meeting tomorrow is featuring, as it does every time, one or two of the ANRP prize winners. And Netta is one of the prize winners, and she is presenting this work there tomorrow. So it'd be interesting to see what the broader community thinks. And so congratulations to you. And I imagine several of us will show up to hear you. But I am interested in seeing how it's received by the broader IETF community as well. So, okay. So at this point, we've covered all of the documents that were updated. I think we have a number of calls for adoption that we need to do. We have some that we haven't done yet for existing documents. And we also have a document we need to send out. I believe it's ready for working group last call. I'm not sure. It's the ref ID document. The last time we talked, we said we needed to pull the leap smear stuff out. That's been done. And I was looking at it again, and I believe it's probably at this point ready to go, and we just haven't done that. I don't know, Harlan, if you had any planned updates to that, or if we were ready to send that for working group last call. Should be ready to go. Okay, great. And then I know that we have some extension field drafts that we didn't send out for adoption. As I said, we're clearing our plate of a bunch of existing documents, and we'll get to work on the additional documents. At this point, we have reached the end of our agenda. Does anybody have any other business? Oh, so Suresh, can you hold up the blue sheet? Has everybody in the room signed the blue sheet? Okay, so we can pass that around again so folks can sign it. And I think that brings us to the end. We've sort of wrapped up at the process of wrapping up a bunch of work that's been on the table for a long time, which is kind of a good feeling once we get it actually wrapped up. And so, any other questions? Well, oh, wait.
Maybe I missed it, but did you mention data minimization draft? What's the status for that? I don't think there was any.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list. I skipped right over it. So that we believe the status of the data minimization draft is that it's gone through working group last call, and we were waiting on one set of comments. We haven't received those comments, and so I believe at this point, and we need to do a quick review of the mailing list ourselves just for our own sanity, but I believe it's ready to go to the IESG. So, I mean, was that
Yes, that was the question.
I mean, as I recall, the current draft represents everything. So this is, so I'm guessing, Harlan, that you don't have audio, right? That's why you're, okay. So in the, oh, he is. Oh, okay, excellent. Go ahead, Harlan.
I don't believe I've received any responses to the objections I've brought forward on the data minimization draft.
So this, I'm going to speak for Anshul real briefly. This is where this is why I said we need to review the mailing list, because I thought that we were at the stage where we were waiting on information from you, Harlan. So
I did not understand. I did not know that. So if you are waiting on information from me, I'll have to go figure out what it might be and then take care of it.
Right. So maybe the thing to do is to have a small conversation with the data minimization authors and you and maybe the chairs and figure out what piece we're missing. But when Did and I were talking earlier today, we thought that it was something we were waiting from you for. So
I mean, I don't have any new information. The objections I've raised, I've done before, and I don't know what new information you could want about them, but okay.
he says he sent it in. So. Okay. I think we're going to have to take this offline, Harlan, because there appears to be confusion between at least the chairs. So, so we'll set up a side conversation with the parties involved here. But our understanding was it's been through working group last call, and the objection that we had one objection on the table. So that's the answer to your original question, Anshul, which is what's the status of that draft. All right, so way forward is the last thing I did recall that there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. We do seem to make a little bit better progress when we do virtual interims. So we will be planning some virtual, one, maybe two virtual interims between now and the Singapore meeting. And we may try and plan some sort of a virtual interop testing event for NTS, if that makes sense as well. Any other comments, questions, comments? Excellent. Thank you very much. And I give you some extra time back in your day. This has got to be one of the quietest rooms I've ever seen. You guys clearly did not do your afternoon coffee break.
That's the idea.
These are the changes.